What's going on, my friends? Warming up for deadlifts right now. Nothing too exciting today. I think my top weight off the top of my head is like 535, 545. Gonna hit a bunch of singles to try to work on getting my technique locked in early this training cycle. Gonna hit a rep set there. Between those, I will be doing 1,000,000 hanging leg raises, which I will touch on in a moment. Then I have paused front squats, some paused front squat back downs. Might do a rack hold in between there just to continue building up my tolerance to those upper end weights. Some calf work with the squats as per usual to keep my ankles healthy. And then finishing up the day with back extensions and glute ham raises for some additional posterior chain hypertrophy work. So I mentioned the ab work there. I personally find that the inclusion of additional ab work, not just whatever core activation you get from heavy compound loading, benefits my lifts, especially I think in a sport like strongman where the tasks we're asked to do are so varied that hyper-specific preparation isn't always an option. So you could say, oh, well, if you squat in adequate volumes, frequencies, intensities in preparation for your new PR, your abs will be just as strong as they need to be for that PR, and everything will develop in like proper ratios to one another. Because the tasks I'm asked to do are all over the place, I find that keeping a surplus of ab strength is helpful. I think Paris has the same bit, like ab top 3 exercises as I do, maybe plus or minus 1. My big 3 for abs have always been hanging leg raises, ab rollouts, and GHD sit-ups. I find that for like abdominal development, for strength, which is more so what I know, but I assume they do a pretty good job for hypertrophy. Those have always checked my boxes with there's a bunch of other ab exercises that I like, that I feel are effective. I would definitely include planks and dead bugs in there as exercises I find very effective. You can look back at some old Brian Alsruh videos where he talks about all the different core variations he'll do in his giant sets between his main compound work. And I think that knowing a variety of ab exercises can be a way to keep it novel. And if something's novel, you might be more inclined to work hard. So if you're slogging away at the same 2 ab exercises forever, I think when it gets really mundane, your effort can start to tailor off. And so knowing a bunch of different ab exercises can keep it fresh, keep you working hard. And abs aren't necessarily always about having the strongest, most optimal ab training possible. It's about doing enough to have them be a little bit over prepared at all times. And that's kind of what I aim for, is as long as I'm hitting that threshold of effort and sets, I derive the benefits. I find that when I'm doing hanging leg raises, my back feels better. I've tried to hone in on exactly how many working sets I need to hit to kind of reach that benefit of my back feeling better. Haven't been able to really nail that down too well yet. So I just kind of spam them. And I find that as long as I keep that in there and I keep working hard on it, I derive the benefits. And I think I like doing repetitive shit so I can keep my big 3 as my primary like abdominal exercises without ever really burning out on them. But if you know that's your tendency and you know that your effort is going to slack, you can account for that within your program and kind of rotate through a bunch of different ab exercises. And as long as the effort stays there, you should be good to go. All right, so I figured it'd be kind of interesting to give you guys a breakdown of the strategy that Paris and I came up with to continue to develop my conventional deadlift. So I think I have a somewhat unique problem in that I'm built, like I would say, poorer than average to deadlift. but I have managed to achieve a fairly high level of deadlifting strength. And the issue that arises from this, for at least me personally, is that the number of true working sets I can handle on a weekly basis on a conventional deadlift from the floor is quite low. Back when I pulled sumo, this was less of an issue because the stress on the low back was less. But as far as conventional goes, each set, due to a combination of absolute load and maybe poor leverages, is that much more taxing for me, or at least so it seems. And what I have done in the past and the strategy that I've leaned into to allow me to develop my deadlift to the point we're at is keeping the volume relatively low on the pulls from the floor and compensating for that by keeping the intensity relatively high. So I'm going to define intensity a little differently here, meaning just the average RPE is a little bit higher, because anytime I've tried to accumulate sub-maximal volume, it has not worked so good from a fatigue management standpoint. So instead I went lower volume, higher effort per set, and then supplemented that missing volume via accessories that were taxing in a better profile. So maybe doing chest supported rows and pull downs for back, maybe doing glute ham raises and back extensions for the posterior chain to fill in that volume gap that was created by the lower volume approach on the deadlift. And this has gotten me to a 800 conventional pull and an 805 sumo pull. The issue arising from this strategy is that due to the low specificity of it, I'm not super technically proficient at deadlifting. I am just strong. And that kind of puts a cap on how much further I can take this. So the strategy that Paris and I have chose to employ is basically to do almost like speed work singles on a lower timer in my warm-ups to fit in a lot more first reps to each deadlift training session. So I get that much more practice in a way that isn't going to be particularly taxing, because they're warm-up weights, just repeating singles until things feel locked in. And so far, so good. This has afforded me a hell of a lot more practice than I could do on my program before. And then the secondary day, we are doing stiff leg deadlifts. Just based on my leverages, those are goddamn hard for me. They tend to work weaknesses in underdeveloped hinging mechanic. So they're well selected in terms of what they're building. And then the other part that's really nice is due to the decrease in absolute load, I can do more normal amounts of volume on stiff legs. Like we take a more traditional approach to building up the stiff legs, that we don't have to have like the crazy workarounds that we do on the conventional. So that's just like plugging in submaximal volume and then introducing a little bit of load and higher intensity sets partway through. And it's some pretty traditional stuff on that front, which is nice to just get in any kind of deadlifting in a more traditional manner. And then I can maybe take a more similar approach to those to how I approach the lifts I have good leverages for, such as squatting and benching, putting in a little bit more sub-maximal volume and doing the things I'm familiar with from those other two lifts. So it's kind of where we're at with it right now. Things are going quite well, fitting in all of those singles on the way up for technique, just making sure not to do so many that I'm very fatigued. All right, so I finished up my practice singles for the day. Gonna hit a rep set, hopefully not gonna do any grinding. I just don't find grinding deadlifts early in a training cycle to be remotely beneficial. So we'll just hit some reps, see where we're at. Then we're moving on to front squats. Don't feel too strong today, though that's not surprising. Early in the training cycle when I'm pushing the volume, there's definitely a lot of fatigue overlap between the primary squat secondary deadlift day and then the primary deadlift secondary squat day. I'm not 100% recovered. I woke up this morning, my hamstrings were still a little gassed from the stiff legs on that prior lower body session. I've always kind of broken it down myself. I'm not sure if I want to say this, but the way I've broken it down in my head is is that within strength training, there is going to be a ton of times while you train while you're still fatigued within an effective training program. And that's not necessarily something that you have to look twice at. It's going to happen. Lots of very good powerlifters kind of get to the point where they start labeling their days. Okay, this is my secondary day. This is my tertiary day. I know I'm fatigued on that tertiary day. So I'm not ever going to really compare my primary and tertiary day performances. I'm just going to compare my tertiary day to my past tertiary day, knowing that they're always going to be pretty fatigued coming into that third session, right? So it's just part of strength training. Some models of training won't have you do this, something really low frequency focused on recovery, like let's say the Lily Bridge method. No, the point is to be coming in with basically no fatigue from the prior heavy lower session. Whereas in higher frequency programs, which I tend to subscribe to for most of us more normal sized people, training under pre-fatigue is normal. I think that this is a little bit of a divisive issue within hypertrophy training. The evidence seems to support that there's not necessarily an issue training a muscle before it's 100% recovered. So training it while it still has DOMs can be okay. I think it is Brad Schoenfeld is kind of been pretty vocal about this, saying, hey guys, this is the direction the science is going. If you claim to be evidence-based, let's kind of bear this in mind, that we don't have to be 100% recovered. On the other end of the coin, you do have smart, maybe less research-based guys like John Meadows, famously Dorian Yates, who are big believers that there's no point in training a muscle before it's fully recovered. And all I can give you, aside from presenting those two sides, is my personal anecdote. And that was when I started resting more between my sessions. Let's say from a hypertrophy perspective, early in a training cycle, my strength gains were worse just because of a little bit less practice on the motions, but I grew relatively quickly. This is a non-science-based opinion. This is 100% anecdotal, so I'm just going to slap that caveat on there and do with this what you will. But I did feel as though the very high frequencies alongside the high volumes was almost stunting the adaptive response to my training. So take that for what you will. But because I am strength training, it is perfectly normal for me to come into this session, feel a little pre-fatigued, and know my performance is dampened a little bit. It's not about maximizing my performance on this session. It's about putting in appropriate work. Yeah, because I don't really care what I hit for these rep outs on deadlifts. I care more so about getting within that right range of stimulus to where I'm going to be better for the next time. And that's Mike T's garden analogy. If we can't force adaptation, all we can do is try to create an environment that facilitates it. So eating right, sleeping right, and then hanging out within the right thresholds of training. So it's the goal for the day, is try to find that threshold, not below, not above. right, so nothing super cool on the pause fronts. Worked up to 330 for 8. Moved like 330 for 8. Leaving my belt off on this day because it feels beneficial, at least for the time being. So that's super cool. Before my back off sets, I decided I would do rack holds. I've kind of been split whether just to do heavy front rack holds on just my primary front squat day, or after deadlift, I may as well get it done because that seems to be the limiting factor within my front squat. So I did some today. I worked up to 555 and I got a full 10 breaths, which is what my target was. So I'm pretty stoked about that because that's the first time I've been able to do a front rack hold for 10 breaths above my reach goal for this training cycle being 550. So hopefully I'm moving in the direction of being limited by muscular strength rather than passing out. So that's fun.